welcome everybody to this webinar with, I think, the world's longest title, Everything You Need to Know About the CompTIA Network Plus N10-006 Certification Exam. It takes me more than one breath to say that. But the title is apropos because that's exactly what I plan to deliver to you over the next hour. Now, let's get this party started. Just very briefly about your presenter. My name is Tim Warner. As Lindsay said, I'm a full-time tech trainer with Pluralsight, focusing on the IT ops space. I've held the Network Plus certification since just about the beginning of the program. March 2000 is when I first certified, and I've taken every version since. Let's see, I would consider myself professionally to be an IT generalist. I just love technology so much across the board, it's been difficult for me to specialize. Network, servers, desktops, the whole thing, even software development, although I certainly wouldn't consider myself a developer. Now, in planning this webinar for all of you, there's the question of what brings you here. If we were together in a room face-to-face, I would simply ask you. So I have to make some assumptions. You know what they say about assumptions. But really, I would think that your experience is either you're currently studying for the N10-006 exam, and you just want a leg up on what to expect and what you should focus on. Perhaps you've been studying for the N10-005, which is the version that's ready to go away, and you're not sure whether you should stay the course and get certified on the 005 exam, or if you should just shift your study to 006. We'll certainly answer those questions in this webinar. And then, of course, perhaps one or more of you are brand new to the certification entirely, and you just want to know what's going on. So I'm going to be structuring the content to hit all three of these groups. And as Lindsay said, please keep that chat box busy because I don't want to do a death by PowerPoint here. I'm planning to present for about 30 minutes, and then I'd like to spend the rest of the time with you answering your questions. That's exactly why we're here, to answer your questions and help you out and make sure that whatever your goal is, we're moving you toward that. So our agenda for today is first, what's in it for you? If you've ever heard that acronym before, WIFI, that's what that stands for. I want you to walk away today understanding more than you did about the Network Plus certification program. Also want you to walk away having a clearer idea of best practices for passing the test. How do you or how should you approach stuff like practice questions, theory, practice labs, all of that kind of stuff. And that again, this should all be translated into action. I'm a pretty practical person myself, and having attended a lot of seminars and classes myself, I understand the overwhelm factor. I know that Lindsay has mentioned that we're recording this presentation and we're going to make the link available. That's absolutely true. But I want you to relax and note this URL if you don't mind, because I put a PDF version of this slide deck and also, even more importantly, a text file that contains a whole bunch of relevant hyperlinks. The bottom line is I'm going to be discussing quite a bit over the next 30 minutes. And rather than clutter up the slides with URLs and you'd be scrambling writing them down, if you're going to write anything down, just write down this URL, and that zip file contains that links list. So everything I'm going to be showing you, you can get to immediately as soon as you download that, okay? All right. So our first item of business, I think, is understanding the distinction between the current N10-006 Network Plus certification versus the one that's still alive right now. You can still take 005, but very shortly it's going to go away. So just the facts regarding this stuff. This is a table from the CompTIA website that I've added. You notice in the lower left corner I put a bit.ly link. Just FYI, those URL shorteners are case sensitive, so that last piece with the capital J and the capital A and capital T, make sure to use the correct case or the link won't work. But anyway, this is a really nice, I couldn't improve on it, that's why I'm borrowing it, comparison between the two tests. We already talked about the IDs. The launch date for the exam, the current exam was launched in February of this year. The number of questions and the type of questions and length is pretty much the same. It looks like CompTIA is backing off the item count from approximately 100 items to 90. But in terms of what kinds of questions you'll be asked, multiple choice versus performance, that's going to be about the same. The length of test is an hour and a half. The passing score is 720. Just parenthetically, I've always found it kind of funny that the passing score isn't just a straight percentile or percentage. It's 720 on a scale from 100 to 900. I think you have to be a professional programmer to understand that. The bottom line is that you're looking for a pass. I've never been asked on a job interview. So you have the Network Plus. What was your score? It's a question of have you passed the test. So in one sense, earning 720 or earning 900 is immaterial because as long as you pass the exam, you are qualified and you receive your certification. Now, speaking of qualification, notice recommended experience according to CompTIA is to have approximately 9 months of networking experience, and it'd help, according to CompTIA, that is, if you have their A+. If you don't know what the A+ is, I'll explain that briefly at the end of the webinar. And this is a chicken and egg thing, really, when you look at 9 months of networking experience, because what if you're in the position where you want to get into the industry? So how can you get the industry experience until you're hired, and perhaps you can't get hired until you have your Network Plus? Note that these recommended experience things are not required. They're recommended. You can take the exam tomorrow with 0 months of experience if you want to. These are just suggestions. The exam is localized, as you can see. But actually, it's a good point. Notice that for the N10-006, there's a couple languages. It looks like Japanese and German may not have been finished. You'd have to go to the CompTIA website to find out. There's also an important thing that's happened over the last couple years with CompTIA tests, and that is retirement. It used to be that once you passed a CompTIA test, you were certified for life with that. And that is true. You still will have your Network Plus forever, but it officially goes out of the certification becomes a retired status after 3 years. And the point with that is that CompTIA wants to make sure that you're not letting your technology fall to the wayside, that you're staying up to date. I have a little bit more to say of that in another slide. If you've never taken an IT certification exam, the registration process is pretty similar regardless of the vendor. In CompTIA's case, you want to register with Pearson VUE. Again, the links list that's on my website, and I'll give you that zip address at the end of this seminar again in case you missed it. I believe the URL is pearsonvue.com/CompTIA. You go there, and the important piece, you have to pay the registration fee, which currently is $277 in US dollars. That's not cheap, so it's definitely something that that's why you're here, I would imagine, because you want to exert due diligence and be as thoroughly prepared as possible before you lay out that money. And that money is per attempt, so if you don't pass once, it's not like you get a free second shot like Microsoft does, for instance, with some of their certifications. But anyway, you go to Pearson VUE, you pay the money, and just as importantly, you choose your nearest authorized Pearson VUE testing center. So you'll need to report to that center on your exam date, and you'll need 2 forms of ID. It's pretty strict, the authentication process when you get there. You can't take in your wallet or cell phone or anything like that into the exam room. But you just take the exam. You'll know immediately whether you've succeeded or not succeeded, and you go from there. It takes a few weeks for CompTIA to send you the certificate, but you'll have a CompTIA exam ID number, and you'll be in the system and good to go. Now, I mentioned the certification renewal piece. What the heck does that mean? Well, as I said, you get instant results. So you're certified for all intents and purposes as soon as you leave the testing center. And you'll get a printout of your score report before you leave the testing center so you can document to whoever needs to. If you're applying for a job and you need to document your status, or maybe if you're a government contractor and you need to demonstrate that you're certified, you can use that initially. But as I said, the certification officially expires in 3 years. It'll show up on your transcript. You can always log into CompTIA.org and print an official copy of your transcript, but it'll show expired after 3 years. The purpose behind that, again, is just to make sure that you're keeping up with your education. The way that you renew your certification is you can either take the latest version of the Network Plus, or actually you can take another CompTIA test. It doesn't even have to be the Network Plus. And there's some other ways that you can recertify as well. CompTIA has what's called their Continuing Education Program, or their CE program. And again, I keep referring to that zip file on my website. You can also do just a Google search for CompTIA CE program, and you'll go to the page and you'll learn about all the specifics. Just something to keep in mind. All right, so let's get into the really meaty stuff here. What's changed between the N10-005 test and the N10-006 test? What do you need to know? Well, certification vendors nowadays, almost universally when they do their blueprints, they'll divide the skill set into top-level categories called domains, and you see that there's still 5 domains from the old exam to the new one, but you'll see that the focus is a little bit different. Let's see. Network concepts, network installation and configuration, network media, a lot of that's been rolled into network architecture and network operations nowadays in the 006. Network security is still a separate domain. Troubleshooting has been added as a totally separate domain in the 006 exam, as is, you see domain 5 there, industry standards, practices, and network theory. Now, just those words are probably pretty meaningless to you, and admittedly, they're very vague. You'll want to download the Network Plus blueprint from the CompTIA website, because they will give you a very exhaustive bullet list of every single topic that they expect you to know under each of those domains. Note also the percent of examination. That's not particularly helpful, for at least personally, because you'll notice that CompTIA has spread the percentages pretty evenly, approximately 20%. So, I mean, if there was a big disparity, like 34% in one and 14% in another, then that might guide your studying a little bit so you'd know where to put more emphasis. But you see here it's pretty well standard across the board, so you'll want to put your studying equally across all those domains. I don't know if that's good news or bad news for you, but it's the way that it is. More on blueprint changes. Specifically, what has CompTIA changed as they've evolved the 005 test to the 006? Well, the 006 focus areas, one, and I strongly applaud CompTIA for this, removing obsolete technology references. For instance, you need to know a lot about random access memory, or RAM, for the Network Plus, but you don't need to know about the super old stuff like the SIM and DIM modules from way back, like the 30-pin SIMs and 72-pin SIM modules. Those are historical relics, and they're not on the blueprint anymore. In my training, I actually do talk about them a little bit, because personally I'm a history buff, and hopefully you are too, to a degree. But it's nice because, again, I mean, when I think of 2000, when I first took Network Plus, the networking landscape has changed so dramatically from then until now. I mean, even from a few years ago to now, the landscape changes so much. CompTIA recognizes that. So we have a focus on cloud computing. You know, that's a $5 term that you hear a lot. Information security, with all the big breaches we've had and unfortunately continue to have in the world, CompTIA expects us to understand more than perhaps in the past about best practices with InfoSec. Mobile device management and bring your own device, BYOD, again, that's really big nowadays. Employees want to know if they can bring their personal laptop into work, or if they can connect to network resources from their iPad or their smartphone. So that's on the blueprint. All right, more particularly, as you see, we're kind of drilling in. We're starting broad, and now we're gradually getting deeper and deeper. Now we're into the exam questions themselves. What's on the menu as far as that's concerned? Historically, CompTIA has been known for terse multiple choice items. And by terse, I just mean really brief. If you've taken certification exams from other vendors, some of those items can be really big. I'm thinking of Microsoft in particular, where you're faced with wading through a couple paragraphs of background information before you're actually asked a question. CompTIA, to their credit, they get right to the meat and potatoes. You'll just see a setup of a couple sentences or maybe even just a single sentence, and you'll be asked to choose one or more than one from a collection of multiple choice items. Another thing that was started, I believe, in the 005 exam is performance-based items. And so instead of just a bank of multiple choice items, you actually have to complete a task, which is a little bit more invasive, isn't it? But when you think about what CompTIA is trying to do, it makes sense. What they're trying to do is validate that you have not only the theoretical understanding of modern-day data networking, but that you also know how to do it. And ultimately, when you get hired, it's one thing to say, yes, I have a Network Plus cert, but it's another thing when you're actually on the job and you need to get stuff done. The question is, can you actually do the work? Tips that I have for you regarding the multiple choice items. Number one, you're going to see plausible distractors. Those who write these certification exam questions, the best practice is you want to have a very clear correct answer to the exclusion of the others, but you don't want to put bogus choices in as distractors. I've written a lot of practice exam items myself. I used to work for Transcender back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And the best distractors, in other words, the incorrect choices, are ones that actually exist and not just something that you can rule out because you know it's bogus. Now, CompTIA, as you may or may not know, is an industry consortium. It's a collection of vendors and academic, government. It's just a consortium of people and organizations who have an interest in technology. And the idea is that CompTIA exams are supposed to be vendor neutral. However, to be perfectly blunt here, you will notice some skewing towards certain technologies. And I don't know any of the politics. I don't have any of the insight behind the scenes there. But if you're going to focus on any particular vendors for Network Plus, I would make sure that you're very clear at network configuration tasks in Microsoft Windows, and also for the Cisco. Of course, Cisco is not the only game in town when it comes to routing and switching and wireless access points and firewalls. But I'm just giving you that as a tip. You might want to do a little extra studying just to know the very basics. Nothing detailed with Cisco necessarily, but just the basics of their iOS. iOS stands for Inter-Network Operating System. That's just the operating system that runs on a lot of Cisco equipment. I'm not talking about the Apple iOS. That's something different. The sample question I wrote for you at Wright asks, which Windows-based utility displays detailed protocol connection info for TCP connections? Well, what do you think? Want to type in the chat window? Which of those is the correct answers? What will you do from the Windows command prompt or a PowerShell session if you want to see TCP connection information? Is it NetBIOS, NBTstat, NetStat, or ping? Anyone? Very good. William, Charlie, Def. Wow, we're getting a lot of good responses here. Yep, that's right. The correct answer is NetStat. And if you're thinking, well, that's not too tough, you know, I'm not going to minimize the Network Plus test. It can be challenging for some. It can be more elementary to others. The bottom line is you need to be able to recognize what these tools are. NetBIOS, NBTstat, and ping are valid technologies or tools, but the one that's the winner, so to speak, is NetStat. With regard to performance-based items, what you're going to see is some kind of mock-up or simulation. Could be, for instance, and this is just one I whipped up myself, maybe it's showing you the web interface for a router or a wireless access point. So you're going to be tested on basic navigation tasks and configuration tasks, both using graphical user interface or GUI tools, and maybe even you'll be asked a command line tool where you need to type in a command. In this simple, well, I shouldn't say simple, in this example, let's say, this is showing a Cisco wireless access point interface, and perhaps, and I'm just making up this question myself, maybe you're asked to hide the network name. You're in a situation where your customer says, I have people who aren't authorized trying to connect to my wireless access point. How can I hide the name from, showing up on the network? So in this case, you'd need to understand that we're talking about SSID broadcast, and these controls would actually be clickable So you could open those drop-down list box controls, or you could click those radio buttons, but you'd be marked correct only if you adjusted the SID broadcast. So it's not like a Cisco exam. Cisco, for their tests, they have very comprehensive performance-based items where you need to do whole configurations. Here it's generally a single task that requires just a single click of a mouse somewhere, or maybe a couple clicks. Oh, some proprietary, some conceptual. What I mean by that is that you may see some proprietary screens like a Windows control panel, or you may just see a conceptual diagram. Maybe you see a network diagram where you're asked to click where's the best place to put a wireless access point. You see what I mean? So it's not all necessarily tied to a vendor. All right, so having decided which direction you're going in, perhaps since we're so late in the game with the 005 test, and given what I've said about a 3-year expiration, you're probably best off focusing on the 006. How can you get prepped as efficiently as possible? How much is this going to cost you in terms of time, money, effort, and so forth? Well, over the years I've developed a study method. It's not trademarked or anything. Tim's triangle study method. This is just kind of jocular joke. But no, seriously, I believe strongly that to prepare for and pass a IT certification exam, you need 3 pillars or 3 sides of the triangle. You draw your own metaphor. You need to understand the theory, the basic what's going on behind the scenes, be able to recognize vocab terms and definitions. You also need to know how to apply that theory. Ultimately, as a working networking professional, you're going to have your hands dirty with layer 1 stuff, with cables, network interface cards, switches, connectors. You'll be in software all day long, whether you're troubleshooting networking on Windows or OS X or Linux, working on network devices. You need to know how to do that. And specifically for a certification test, because this is a computer-based exam, you should get familiar with what that feels like, because it's a different thing from sitting in a job interview or a tech interview, and it's different yet from taking a pencil and paper exam. It's a different experience. So those are the 3 components of what I call my triangle study method. The theory piece in a little bit more detail. Certainly, we at Pluralsight have you covered 100%. We have what's called a learning path, and the link to that is in that zip file, to mention that for the 100th time. We are a CompTIA training partner, and our training is authorized by CompTIA. So what that means for you is that you can rest assured that my co-instructor, Ross Bagurtis, and I are covering every single one of those bullet items in the N10-006 learning path. That's a typo, isn't it? Wait a minute. I get these numbers so messed up in my mind. I'm talking about the latest exam, okay? I'm second-guessing myself here. You want to go to pluralsight.com if you're not already a subscriber. I hope you are. And our learning path consists of 6 related courses. And the first one, Ross, our colleague Jason Helmick, and I are just talking about the certification and what to expect and best practices. And then the content, we have courses on network architecture, network operations, network security, troubleshooting standards and practices. Now those should look familiar if you remember a few slides back when we looked at the domains, because Ross and I structured the courses directly off of that blueprint. Again, being a test taker, I know how important it is to have the security of knowing that we're covering every single topic. Now, a course is a collection of related modules, and a module is a collection of individual video clips. It sounds a lot more complicated than it really is. We've got a really great player and a website. You can just get on the Pluralsight site and do a search for Network Plus and find what you need, okay? As far as book references, some of you, in addition to computer-based training, you want a book to study as well. I'm a book nerd myself. I would recommend, having read them all, my friend Todd Lamley has a long-running study guide. It's in its 3rd edition with Cybex. And I would suggest this over the others simply because Todd has such a conversational teaching and writing style. It tends to vibe with a lot of learners. So I'm just throwing that out there for you for grins, FYI. The practice leg of the stool, this is important. If you're not working in IT, how are you going to get your hands dirty with routers, switches, firewalls, and Ethernet, and so forth? Well, one thing you can do is ride along with our demos. When Ross and I teach, we're doing not only the PowerPoint, but we're putting just as much emphasis on practical demonstrations. And you can ride along with those demos with minimal, or I dare say, zero investment. And I'll explain that further in just a moment. You can go online and for absolutely free, the Microsoft Virtual Labs, these are 90-minute time blocks that you can sign up for and get access to entire Microsoft networks. It's in a sandbox, safe environment where you can work through different skills and concepts. There's a lot of those kind of sites out. There's simulation products, software, like the Cisco network simulators. All of those links are in the course notes. And Ben, I just saw your chat. The introduction course is in final post-production right now. So what I'd suggest you do, Ben, is just keep checking back. I'm hoping sometime next week we'll have the introduction course live. But it has been recorded. It has been edited. It's just in the pipeline for release. All of the content courses are live and fully there on our Pluralsight website. So specifically, what is the guidance that I have for you regarding building a practice lab so you can ride along with Ross's and my demos? Windows 8.1 and Windows 8, I don't think Windows 7 has it, but Windows 8.1 has Hyper-V built right into the operating system, and you can use that to create virtual machines for no additional expense. If not, Oracle has a hypervisor called VirtualBox. Again, it's free. It's a desktop virtualization program. And what you can do with that is create these virtual machines. You can actually build out a network on your hardware computer and use evaluation and or open source software. You can download Windows Server, Windows Client. Of course, Linux is free and open source. And develop a virtual network. Now, what would you need for your physical computer? I would suggest that you have at least 8 gigs of RAM, because when you're building a virtual network, RAM and CPU tend to be the biggest items, because what you're doing is sharing the hardware on your physical computer with your virtual computers. Okay? Disk space would be another one, because sometimes these virtual machines can get a little bit sizable. As far as practicing in IP internetworking, routing, subnets, and all that good stuff, I use the VIOS virtual router. It's free open source software. It also, you install it as a virtual machine. Do a search on Pluralsight for VIOS and you should find my colleague Greg Shields and I both, not in our CompTIA training, but in our Microsoft training, we actually do demos where we show you how to set up the VIOS router. And that's really going to put your studies on another level once you start introducing virtual routers into your environment. Marty, I see your question. Are we able to download the Windows OS free for VirtualBox? Yes, you can. In fact, that links list I keep mentioning, I've given you direct links to the Microsoft Evaluation Center, and that's where you can download. I think it's a 120-day free trial, fully functional, and VirtualBox and Hyper-V are both completely free. So that's how you can get going with this enterprise software without having to buy the expensive licenses, and do it in a completely legal way. Finally, the drilling, the practicing the certification exam questions. What's up with that? Well, you want to look for a quality exam simulation. I'm a little biased having worked for Transcender. What we tried to do at Transcender, in addition to giving a fully accurate exam sim, we actually tried to teach in our explanations. So for that reason, I still recommend Transcender or their partner self-test software, because what you see on the right is an example of their interface. You see not only the question, but you see a very detailed explanation that explains exactly why the correct answer is correct, and just as importantly, why the incorrect choices, the distractors, are incorrect, you see. You might have heard the term brain dump. Brain dump refers to an illegally obtained exact copy of the exam questions. Now, those aren't quality exam simulations. One thing to be careful, well, there's a whole bunch of reasons to avoid brain dumps, but one is that by using those resources, you're violating the non-disclosure agreement, or NDA, that you need to agree to in order to take the Network Plus exam. And I've known people who have been decertified if the vendor learned that you used brain dumps to prepare as opposed to using legitimate exam simulations. So I just wanted to say that for completeness sake. All right, so wrapping up the slides, because I want to address all of your questions head on. What are your next actions going forward from here, from this webinar? For instance, what's on your game plan after the Network Plus? Presuming that you're studying for the Network Plus right now and you're going to be passing it over the next days, weeks, or months, what do you want to look at? What are some other entry-level IT certifications? Well, CompTIA has a whole bunch of them actually, but the one that I see in my experience that many Network Plus candidates go for is the A+. And what this validates is basic computer hardware and software support skills. So the Network Plus, the job role would be a network technician. Maybe you're working for an authorized Dell or HP partner and you're a repair tech who goes out to different client sites to do on-site repairs. Maybe you work for a big organization and you're tasked with maintaining the organization's own networking equipment. You see? A+ is sort of the same thing, but the focus is more on hardware, kitting, building PCs, upgrading them, repairing them. And on the software side, think help desk, think desktop support technician skills. It's a really good skill set actually. Cisco, in their space, they're one of the leaders in routing and switching. They have an entry-level cert called the Cisco Certified Entry Networking Technician, or CCENT for short. And what CCENT is, it's basically the first half of the CCNA, if you've ever heard of the CCNA credential. So it serves as a nice waypoint for people who want to validate their skills with Cisco equipment but aren't ready to tackle the full-on CCNA, the Cisco Certified Network Associate. So I wanted you to be aware of that if you aren't. And then finally, and there are others, there's Linux certification, there's OS X certification, but all I fit on this slide were the A+, CCENT, and Microsoft has a line of certifications that all share the acronym MCSA. That stands for Microsoft Certified Solutions Associate. And what this cert does is validates your skills in supporting one Microsoft product. You could take an MCSA test on Windows Server 2012 or Windows 8.1, SQL Server Database, SharePoint Server, Microsoft Azure. The list goes on and on and on. But the idea there is you want to validate your ability to configure Microsoft's own software. And you're getting the validation directly from the vendor. All right, Areno. So let me hop on over in my chat window here to see any questions that are queued up. I see one that asks, if I take the 005, the old exam, by the end of August and fail, can I retake that version or do I have to take the new one? That's a good question that I don't have an answer to offhand. Lindsay and I have captured your questions, so I will get an answer to that question for you. I'm trying to think of the most efficient way to put the answer out there. I guess what I'll do is when I get an answer, I'll tweet it out to Pluralsight. So if you're not following Pluralsight's Twitter feed, please consider doing that. They're at Pluralsight easily enough. So look for an answer there if you would, please. Another question is, what happens if you're studying using the older CompTIA Network Plus objectives? Would you have to start over with the updated stuff? The good news is no, you don't have to start over from scratch. If you're dealing right now and you're immersed in the 2012 objectives, I'm not going to say all, but I would say at least 90% of that carries over to the current objectives. As I showed you a few slides back, the big points of change on the 006 test are in the realm of mobile device management supporting smartphones and tablets, more focus on information security, and some coverage of cloud computing architectures. And that makes sense because those are all super hot technologies now in 2015. And yes, another question, does the Network Plus test cover network virtualization? Yes, it does. And actually, if I were to do this slide deck over again, I would add virtualization to that short list of items that are new and or enhanced on the 006. And again, that makes sense because virtualization fits hand in glove with the cloud, doesn't it? So yes, you will be asked questions on virtualization technology on your Network Plus test. Is the N10-006 Pluralsight class available right now? Yes, it is. We have a learning path that consists of 6 courses, and all of the content courses, all 5 content courses, are live on Pluralsight.com. The first course is the introduction, and that will be up next week, and I would say no later than the week after. But at least the content stuff is right available for you at this moment. Another important question, all these questions are important, but if you're close to sitting for the exam right now, would it be better to do the 005 in a rush or do a little bit more studying and do 006? I do have an answer to that one. Remember that there's a 3-year expiration. If you pass 005 in the next month or so, that exam will be active on your profile for 3 years. Will an HR manager or somebody that you're interviewing with for a job care whether it's the 005 or the 006? In my humble opinion, no. So if I were all the way there, if I were confident in the 005 objectives, I would go for that because you'll have the Network Plus certification, you'll have the certificate, you'll have the wallet card. You know that old saying, been there, done that, bought the T-shirt. I'll bet CompTIA would even sell you a T-shirt. And in my experience, my industry experience, I've never been asked what version Network Plus exam I have, okay? So go with your strengths. Go with your strengths and go with where you are. Oh, yes. Questions about the link. Let me come back to the slideshow. I've kept mentioning over and over again. The summary slide here, just very briefly. Now hopefully understand more than you did about how the Network Plus certification works. I hope now that you have more of a solid action plan with your cert prep, and definitely go forth and conquer. But let me bring up the thank you slide, because that contains that links list link. It's timwarnertech.com/netplus.zip. It's up on my web server right now. And if you unpack that zip file, you'll find a PDF that contains these slides, and also a links list that contains all of the links to everything that we've discussed over the last 30-something minutes. Okay? If you have any questions, comments, concerns, curiosities, you can reach me directly at timothy-warner@pluralsight.com. And any questions that I'm not able to answer for you directly here, when I get an answer, I'll tweet those to Pluralsight. So if you're not following Pluralsight on Twitter, please do so. They're at Pluralsight. See if there's any other questions in here. Will the 006 exam be simulated like test-out exam? In part, yes. Remember that the 005 and the 006 exams include not only multiple choice items, but performance-based items. The performance-based items are not going to be as sophisticated as test-outs. If any of you are familiar, test-out is a company that's known for making very comprehensive simulations. They do a lot, Microsoft, A+, Net+, etc. So yeah, you'll see questions that are sort of like test-out in as much as you'll see an interface and you'll be asked to configure something. But it'll be very basic. You just essentially need to know which option you need to work with, and you need to know whether to set the option to on, off, yes, no, and so forth. The 005 exam is expiring, I think it's 8/31, right? It's the end of August this year. So what are we? Mid-July. So it looks like you've got about a month and a half left if you're getting ready to pass the 005. Now, if you have 2 people who on August 30th, let's say, each take a CompTIA Net Plus, one takes a 005, the other one takes the 006, both of them will have a 3-year expiration. And again, to repeat what I said a couple minutes ago, I don't know if it changes up your attitude or not, But at least in my experience, I haven't ever been asked which version of the test I take. So it's just really up to where you are right now with your skills and how comfortable you are. Another question that asks, I've taken the A+ exam and noticed that there were many questions that asked for the best way to do something. A few that asked for the first step to take. Does Network Plus use the same approach for many of their questions? The short answer is yes. The longer answer is I think CompTIA is smarter about that than they may have been in previous versions of their exams. I myself have criticized CompTIA a bit in years past because I've taken a good portion of their Cert exams, that you could make a case that a question was vague, that it's asking like you're saying, like Glenn asked here. How do you know the best way to accomplish a task? Now, are we talking best way according to, you know what I'm saying? Is it, if it's a switch configuration, are we talking about Cisco best practices, or are we talking? Here's a tip I have for you in general. When you're sitting for an exam, whether it's a vendor-specific exam or even a vendor-neutral exam, whenever you see a reference to best or preferred or first, that's from the perspective of the test vendor. You're taking a Microsoft exam, for instance. I tell people to a certain degree, shelve your real-world experience and be prepared to give the Microsoft answer. What you would see, for instance, on a Microsoft TechNet article, that's going to be the best way to do something from the exam standpoint. CompTIA, for instance, has published their own blueprint for approaching troubleshooting, and it literally shows step 1, 2, 3, 4. And Ross and I give you those details in our training. So if you're asked for the first step to do something, chances are that's something that refers to a CompTIA process that they have published. If not, failing that, if you think it's genuinely a vague exam question, you have the opportunity to provide feedback in the exam engine, assuming that you have time, of course. As a matter of fact, let me think now. I actually forgot whether the exam feedback counts against your time or if it's outside the time. The bottom line is you can give feedback to CompTIA if you really feel strongly that an item is vague. Let's see. Another question that says, do we have any live study sessions for Network Plus or other certs? I'm not sure what you mean by live study sessions, Marty. If you want to chat in the chat window with a clarification. If you're asking about webinars, Lindsay can speak to this in greater detail, but we certainly do these webinars on a regular basis. So as CompTIA revs or revises other exams in their portfolio, we'll definitely offer this kind of webinar for those. If you're wondering by live Pluralsight courses, absolutely. I would just suggest that you go to the site, pluralsight.com, and run a search for whatever it is that you need, whether it's Server Plus or A Plus or CCNA, and you'll find, they're not live, of course, they're pre-recorded, but you'll find those study sessions. Okay, Marty, I just saw your live comment. Interactive study sessions or webinars. Short answer to that, yes. Let's see. Dick Selman, thank you very much. I'm glad that you've been enjoying the training. And you have Todd's deluxe book, right. Do I like the CertMaster tool? I've used that a little bit. CompTIA has their own practice exam software, and they've put a lot of, to use the $5 term, psychometrics in the exam. I'm not to say that it's a psychotic product. No, it's that the psychometricians, the people who are experts in asking questions and garnering feedback, they've structured their CertMaster product to be adaptive, such that instead of just giving you reams and reams of info for you to digest, you step through these practice questions, and depending upon how you answer them, you're actually asked how comfortable you are answering the questions. So if it says, what category Ethernet cable would you need for fast Ethernet, blah, 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 you choose, and then you actually mark whether you feel strongly about it or whether you're guessing. and the engine will actually give you structured feedback and additional questions based on that. So the short answer is, yeah, I think CertMaster is pretty cool. It is quite expensive, though. I think the license is well over $100. So you have to decide whether you're looking for a true simulation of the test, like something CompTIA or Boson would offer, or you're looking for a more of an educational tool, which is what I would consider CertMaster. Robert asks about MeasureUp. It's been a while since I've looked at their content, to be honest with you. So I don't even know if they offer practice tests for the Network Plus. I would assume they do, otherwise you probably wouldn't answer the question. But they historically have partnered with vendors. They, for instance, years ago, MeasureUp was one of the first official Microsoft practice exam providers. So I'm not sure how much their business model has changed over the years, but they are definitely considered a legitimate practice exam provider, yes. See, any other questions we're missing here? Let me go back to what's the fee generally for the exam? The fee is going to be dependent on the exam. Network Plus is $277 in US dollars, and that's per attempt. So if you need to retake the exam, you'll have to pony up another $277. It's unfortunate that CompTIA doesn't have some of the incentives that, say, Microsoft does. Microsoft Learning has a program that they have going most of the time called Second Shot, where you register to take a certification exam through their Second Shot promotion, and you actually get a spare voucher. So you pay, in Microsoft, it's normally, I think, $125 or maybe $150 per attempt. It effectively halves your registration fee, because if you don't pass on your first attempt, Microsoft Learning emails you your Second Shot voucher, and you can re-register to take it again for free. So that's the answer to that. Okay. Kevin asked a good question regarding how to approach the content. Is there a best practice, for instance, on whether you should start with network architecture, which is domain 2, or start at domain 5, which is standards, practices, and theories? That's always a difficult question to answer, even more so given that we have two instructors, Ross and I. Doesn't matter. I would say if I were to give you a yes or no answer, I would say no, it does not matter. There's not a hard dependency, for instance, on you knowing everything in network architecture before you go to network operations. In fact, quite honestly, being intimately familiar with all of the content, you might actually want to start with the 5th domain first, the one that's on standards, practices, and theory, because that one is actually where I teach you the OSI model, the Open Systems Interconnection model, which is, that's like your foundational ground level. That's like the blood, so to speak, that flows through the circulatory system of the entire exam, if you don't mind that tortured metaphor. So actually, yeah, I would probably do the standards and practices first, and then come up to network architecture and network operations, and then clean up with the security and the troubleshooting ones. Good question. Yeah, I guess I haven't thought about it as deeply as I should have until now. In fact, that's a good subject for a Pluralsight blog post. I'm making a note of that right now to follow up on that after we end this webinar. Let's see here. Am I missing any others? Any other questions? And keep them coming, by the way, if you have any questions that are coming to your mind. Right, yeah. Dick's mentioning that our CCNA Introduction to Networking course is a great description of the OSI. I was going to quote a Hair Club for Men commercial from the early 80s, but I don't want to date myself and I don't want to get too corny. But what I'm trying to say is that I'm not only a Pluralsight trainer, but I'm a diehard student, and I watch and listen to courses every single day. So I've looked at that course, the Intro to Networking course, and that's one of the neat things about our training. Particularly when I do a module, I'll end it with a further learning slide where I reference one or two other courses from our library. that can supplement what we've learned in this course. And I think that's good for a couple reasons. One, it's good to get another trainer's view on the material. And it's also good because it allows you to broaden and deepen. If you find in particular that you really vibed with the security content and you're like, gee, I'd like to know more about this security stuff, we've got some fantastic security training. In particular, what's been blowing up our site of late is the EC Council Certified Ethical Hacker, or CEH. That is some dynamite content. So it's another benefit, I guess, of being a subscriber, because you've got such a wide breadth and depth of education that's right there in front of you, you know. And I use myself the Pluralsight iOS player most of the time, so when I'm running on the trail or whatever, puttering around the house, I can get some training in. Richard, I did answer the question which domain I would start with, and I would suggest you do the standards and practices first, and then go to network architecture, then network operations, and then it really doesn't matter whether you do the security or troubleshooting next. You're right that the exam questions are in a random order, so it's not like you're going to get questions, you know, a block from network architecture and then you'll never see that again, you'll get a block. They are randomized. So the order that I'm giving you comes from the perspective of what I think makes the most sense conceptually, right? As you're getting in at the ground floor and gradually starting to get your sea legs, so to speak, and you're starting to link concepts together to perform, ultimately you want to have a really nice cohesive web of concepts that you can actually practice with practically and apply to your certification exam. Yeah, and Charlie mentioned the OSI model. That's foundational to networking. Lindsay, did you say something?
Yeah, I was going to jump in and say, back to Marty's question about the live discussions or the additional webinars for CompTIA discussions. We don't have another CompTIA webinar scheduled immediately, but we're always open to more suggestions, and anyone that has another suggestion can email us at webinars@pluralsight.com. But I was going to make a statement that we do have interactive discussion forums on the course pages. So as you go into the courses, you have the ability to interact with authors and other subscribers if you get stuck or have a question or would like to interact with other subscribers as you're studying.
Boy, am I glad you mentioned that, Lindsay. Yeah, absolutely. I monitor all of my courses. So I get alerted via email if you leave a question or a comment in the discussion page for any of my courses. And Ross is the same way. So yeah, we're right there for you as you're learning. So literally, as you're watching a clip, if there's something that is unclear or you're wondering about, please don't hesitate. Just flip the page over to the discussion side and pop in your question and I'll answer it. It's as simple as that. Isn't that amazing? And Victor, welcome. South Africa. Yeah, I should have welcomed you, all of you, to this presentation by saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. It's wonderful, that world is flat approach to education, that we're all learning together all around the world. Absolutely awesome. Yeah, Marty, it's a collaboration thing. It is. It's like a discussion group where learners can learn from each other directly on the course page, as well as interact with your instructor. Really good stuff, yeah. All right, Arino. Well, I think that's it. I've given you the material. I think I've answered every outstanding question. So with that, I want to thank you all so much again for participating. And I'll hand it back to you, Lindsay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you, everyone, for your questions, for your attendance, for your participation. We really appreciate it. Like I said before, if you have comments or feedback, you can email us directly at webinars@pluralsight.com. Any questions that we didn't get to, we'll be sure to get those directly to Tim later. Again, this webinar was recorded, and we'll email the link in a few days. Remember, please tweet about your experience today and continue the conversation online with hashtag PluralsightLive. We'll be picking a winner at random for a free month of training. Thanks again and have a wonderful day.